Welcome back. Today, our lecture is going to focus on integrity and integral awareness. This is going to be tools which we discuss leadership with and that help you as a leader in taking different perspectives. So, what we'll do today is we'll discuss the concept of integrity and what it means for leadership. We'll apply the integral theory framework, or S. Bjorn Harnce's framework, on understanding how to look at how phenomenon, processes arise in co-arise in a certain manner. And then we'll reflect on the relevance of this integral awareness or integral theory for leadership. So, let's begin. Going to the water. As leaders, integrity is crucial. But sometimes it's hard for us to really pinpoint what we mean by integrity. So what I'd like to ask you to do now is, in pairs, write 5 actions, behaviors, or approaches that you think are crucial for a leader to have or show integrity. And then in a plenary, share these with the rest of your class. Do this exercise and come back before we continue. So, I would imagine that you came up with some consistent aspects of what integrity looks like, and some that you might have considered a little bit off or a little bit different. For me, the easiest way that I think of integrity is in these 2 sentences. You do what you say, and you say what you do. And it's doing the right thing even when no one is watching, right? So it's about accountability, and it's about being truthful to doing what is right. Now, the question for you is, why is integrity important in a leader or in creating leadership moments? Take some time to discuss, 5 minutes or so, and then come back. Now, when you discussed leadership and what integrity means to it, or what integrity is, did everyone in the class have the same understanding? Or in how these actions would reflect in a leader? My guess is that there were some discussions and possibly some discrepancies. And this leads us into the next topic, which is integral awareness. To start, I want you to look at this video by Devdutt Patanik, where he discusses about how we look at the world, what frames the ways in which we look at the world. Take a look at this video, and as you watch it, try and answer this question I've put for you. What is the fundamental cause of the clash of civilizations? Take a look at the whole video, and when you come back, we'll continue. So, how did you find the myths, mythologies, and ideas that Devdutt shared? From this video, I wanted you to consider the following question. How can you, as a leader, help deal with these clashes of different perspectives, of different world visions, of different ideas? Take some time and come back. Now, one of the ways in which as a leader you can help deal with these clashes is to be able to take different perspectives, to understand things from different angles. And that is where integral awareness comes, the integral theory framework. This integral theory framework is divided into 2 axes, right? The individual and the collective, the interior and the external. And we're going to look at those each one by one. If we are in the individual and the interior, then I want you to think of it as I. I, an experience, I have this, I, the first person, I. Yeah? When you're looking at the interior collective, we're talking about the we. The culture, society, the aspects that are internal to us, but that are shared within a common collective. It could be the family, the tribe, certain cultures, certain approaches, and we'll look into these a little bit further on. Now in the external, in the individual, I want you to think of it. It is the behavioral and observable patterns that we have. And in the collective, I want you to think of it as the collective systems that we look at. So again, the I is subjective, and it discusses the personal, individual experience. The it is objective, and it measures behavior. So think of it as being able to measure singular things. Me raising my hand, the temperature of a room, right? These kind of objective measurements that we can find depending on our framework. Again, the we is culture, and it's intersubjective. It's internal, although others might be able to describe it internally. It is something that we understand intuitively and share with others. and it's interobjective. When we take all these different objective aspects and behaviors and we look at them together in a system, then we're looking at the its, the external and collective. So you can think of these as economic systems, market systems, laws, rules, anything that can be looked at a system, ecologies, and so on. So the advantage of this framework is that it reminds us that all of these aspects for a phenomenon or process occur at the same time. They are interrelated and they co-arise, as the author calls it. They happen at the same time. Now that might be a little bit confusing right now, so we're going to look at two examples of how you can use this framework. One of them is individual focus and one of them is problem focused. So let's look at the first one. The individual focused. So you'll notice that the arrows on the individual are pointing out. This means that we can use integral theory or integral awareness in complementing how an individual understands reality, processes or phenomenon that happens. It can look at it in the internal quadrants or the external quadrants. It can look at it as individual or as collective. So for the example, I'd like to invite you to think about lunch when you decide to go to lunch. So your experiential phenomenon in individual and interior is you think, oh, I'm hungry. What are my options for lunch? Am I going to have fish? Or am I going to have beetroot? Am I going to have eggplant? Or am I going to have something that I brought, right? These are your thoughts of how you experience the idea of going to lunch. Then you'll have your behavioral phenomenon, which one of the measurable things will actually be seeing you get up, go to the canteen, maybe take your bag. Other measurements could also be, for example, internal from you, like your sugar levels that are dropping, and so hence you have the idea that you are now hungry. Now, if we move into the lower left-hand corner with the collective interior, we begin to see what we mean by cultural. Depending on the culture you're from, lunch might be for you beef or pork. Some cultures don't eat pork, some cultures don't eat beef. Or some cultures don't eat meat at all. They're vegetarians, right? Depending on the culture that you're embedded in, your cultural options or approaches to lunch will be different. And finally, let's say you get to the canteen or the cafeteria that you go to. The systems, how they influence what kind of lunch you have, depend on what are the market prices. Is it more affordable for you to buy rice or noodles? Are the current markets for meat higher or lower than they are for tofu, for example? So when you think you're going to lunch, you experience all these different systems as the process or phenomenon of having lunch occurs, right? This is the individual focus. Now, let's look at the integral theory from a problem focus. Think of this event. There is lake in which communities gather around, and there has been an uprising of dying fish in that lake. Now, what integral theory lets us know is say, let's look at different methodologies from different fields and look into the problem from these views, as you can see by the arrows. So in the interior individual, we could be looking at how people are psychologically dealing with the situation. What emotions is it coming up? How does this affect their beliefs? If we look at it from the exterior individual, we can look at the objective, remember? The objective aspect. So let's look at empirical data. What are the actual flows of water in the lake? How is the chemistry and biology changing? If we look at the cultural aspect, we can then look at what kind of attributions the culture is giving to them. What are the ethical and religious connotations of all this dying fish in the lake? How are they being understood by a culture? And then if we look at the lower right, the collective and exterior, we see that we can look at the ecological and social systems that happen around here. What are the businesses? What are the politics? What are the environmental aspects? What are the educational and legal frameworks that are happening that influence this problem? So by doing this, both in the individual and in the problem-focused approach, by considering this framework of interior, exterior, individual, collective, we get a fuller picture, an integral picture, of what the situation or phenomenon is. And this will help you as a leader to find different perspectives. Because here comes my final reflection. If all phenomenon and processes occur and co-arise in these four quadrants, how do we approach problems? My guess is, if you've seen them from before, we tend to try and solve problems on the objective external side, the empirical science and the systems thinking. But if we only focus on half of the lenses, perhaps we're only looking at half of the solution, right? So, with that reflection, it's time to jump back into the water. You in your group will now define and take one of these examples, or what is presented to you by your lecturer, and apply the 4 quadrants. You can look at it either as an individual involved in these processes, or look at these processes as a problem or phenomenon in itself. Take your time to work in groups, and then share. When you're done, come back and we'll wrap up. So how was it? It might have not been very easy, but I assure you that you started to see different angles, different aspects, different ideas of how to approach these problems and phenomenon that might have not been evident to you, right? So in my closing remark, I'd like you to look at this picture. This is from a promotional campaign for a bank. The top and the bottom both have the same image, but they can mean different things depending on how you look at them. It could be a bald head, could be a style, could be a soldier, or it could be a survivor. Marriage can be fate, or it can be fear, or it can be a fairy tale. And then in the middle, we see the same word, security. But depending on your views of life, where you are in your stage of life, security can mean something different. Perhaps it's having enough money to buy a faraway remote island. Perhaps it's just a teddy bear, which you can go to sleep. Or perhaps it's a very sophisticated password. So integral theory and integral awareness, what they help us to do is this. It's about being aware of the lens or lenses with which we and others understand the world. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one.